But on a more serious note, I guess we've been focused on our first responders and our frontline workers around the country since COVID sort of has taken off. Nurses in dire straits. An exodus of tired and overworked nurses is looming, with a survey revealing the extent of burnout and fatigue in the state's health system. The Australian Nursing and Midwifery Federation state branch surveyed 3,000 workers and found more than half, 56% to be exact, had planned to leave nursing within 5 years. This is the worst possible result that you could get from a survey when we need more nurses in the system, not less.
I know, but when you look at the amount of work they've had to do, and COVID is one element, but in general, nurses work extremely long hours and they work extremely hard, and it's the same in the ambulance service. So you can't be surprised that this sort of thing would happen. But it comes at a time when we have an ageing population, we have COVID to deal with, and if nurses are looking to leave the system, then God help us all. We need more people in the system to alleviate the pressure that these people are feeling. But the compounding factor here is that wannabe nurses will look at this and go, oh, maybe I don't want to do it after all, which actually makes the situation worse. And that's not what you want.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Just out of curiosity, Caleb, what is the health system like in South Australia? I mean, here in WA, we are flush with cash, a $5.6 billion surplus over here, and we had today the roof collapsing in one of the major hospitals in Perth CBD. What's it like coping with it without COVID? Would it be able to handle a Delta outbreak?
Oh, look, it may well be able to handle a Delta outbreak, but put it this way, in terms of the health system in general, we had the Royal Adelaide Hospital at one end of North Terrace, the eastern end of North Terrace in Adelaide, and they knocked that down and built a brand new Royal Adelaide Hospital at the other end of North Terrace. It was the second most expensive building in the world, and it has fewer beds than the old Royal Adelaide Hospital. How is that possible? Not to sound like a 15-year-old girl, but I cannot even deal with that sort of ineptitude at all.
Speaking of rules and things that are ineptitude, we must go to Yass in the ACT and the border of New South Wales. They're now in a snap 3-day lockdown on the front of the Canberra Times tomorrow. 3 days of freedom, but now Yass is back in lockdown. The council areas of Canberra's border will go up from today and go back into a lockdown just days after being granted a reprieve by the New South Wales government. This on top of another front page story on there where businesses are being warned that they will be shut down if they're finding to not comply, considering that the ACT's COVID figures are not budging. They're being quite stubborn. And apparently businesses are now dobbing on each other. So this is probably the most Canberran story I've ever heard of. But what do you make of that? Businesses sort of dobbing in on each other if they're not complying to the COVID lockdown?
Look, I can kind of understand it because some business owners would feel like that other business owners were putting the possibility of their business being able to operate at risk. But I wouldn't like to think that we're turning into a nation of dobbers, and I think to some degree we are. But I'd be interested in the perspective of business on whether these sort of in and out lockdowns are actually worse than the long lockdowns that places like Sydney and Melbourne have had to deal with. Because the in and out lockdowns, you have no way of planning. It's there and then it's not, and it keeps happening again and again and again. Whereas at least in Sydney and Melbourne, you know where you stand. You can't do that if you're in Yass, or you can't do that if you're in Brisbane, and you keep getting plunged in and out of lockdown, particularly if you're a restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and that's what one of the punters that have spoken to the Canberra Times tomorrow say. You go from 1 week earning $25,000 to the next week earning nothing. It's just, how do you even get that to add up? And then you see the absolute cluster that's happening with the Queensland system of getting businesses the compensation that they desire. It's just not great.